Hello, and welcome to Follow Your Curiosity, where we explore the ups and downs of the creative process and how to keep it moving. I'm your host, Nancy Norbeck. I am a writer, singer, improv comedy newbie, science fiction geek, and creativity coach who loves helping right-brained folks get unstuck. I am so excited to be coming to you with interviews and coaching calls to show you the depth and breadth both of creative pursuits and creative people, to give you some insight into their experiences and to inspire you. This week, I'm picking up where we left off last time when I talked with poet Todd Evans. Todd's sister, Rachel Marianno, also a poet, joined me to talk about her experience growing up in the same artistic family. We talked about when she realized that her childhood was very different from most, how she decided to pursue education rather than theater, and how she's used her role both as a classroom teacher and now as a school administrator to expose students to the arts and encourage them to follow their dreams. And of course, we talked about her poetry. Like Todd, Rachel shares a powerful poem with us and her advice for anyone who's interested in following a creative dream. Without further ado, here's Rachel Marianno. Rachel, I'm so glad you're here. I'm really, really curious to hear about your experience growing up in the same household as your big brother, Todd,
Yep.
who we just talked to. And I think, that's really where I would love to start because, I talked to him a fair bit about what it was like for him and, growing up in such an artistic household. And I'm curious to hear what it was like for you.
It was great. Wow. I didn't know how different my household was until I grew up, until I was an adult. My norm was that, we would get together and we would do shows for our parents. And sometimes they were puppet shows. Sometimes they were plays. Sometimes it was us taking my younger brother and sitting him on my older brother's lap and acting as if he were a mannequin. What do you call those? Not the mannequin.
And all I can think of now is marionette, and that's not right either.
Yeah, there's talking dummies.
Right.
Because my brother had one called Lester McJester. So that's what we would do with my younger brother. We would sometimes do song. My younger brother had a Sesame Street record, so we were always playing songs from the Sesame Street record and singing them to our family. When my father would get home from work, he would often just he'd lay out on the floor for maybe like a half hour, take a nap, and I would dance. And it didn't matter that he was not necessarily watching me, but I took ballet. My heart ambition as a child was to be a ballerina, so I would dance all, in the living room, and I would know that he knew that I was there, and sometimes would catch me dancing. So it was those type of experiences. My mother, she was a singer. She sang classical music, Broadway music, opera. So ironically, down the street was a classically trained, world-renowned pianist who became a good friend of the family, and her children and my brother. We grew up together. So her name was Miss Sims, or Miss Pat. She would come to the house, and my mother would have, they would rehearse for concerts, and her voice, of course, was strong, was big. So we'd be outside playing, and the kids would be like, "Ooh!" Because they could hear my mom inside. Your mom and they're doing that not playwright, that's singing opera. So that made us different, but we got used to it. At night, my father would, when he would come in from work, well, after eating and doing all of that stuff, then he did his second job, which was really his first job, which was writing. So he'd go up to the attic and he would be typing, and you'd hear him go, and then you hear, and that's him talking to himself as he's, letting the characters come to life in his words. And then he'd start typing again. And back then, you still had the where you had to return, you had to move the lever, and then the bell would ring. So, so we'd hear that, and that's where we went to sleep. We were always going to the theater or to New York or somewhere like that. That was our life.
So it wasn't even just your household; it was the people down the street too. You
Absolutely.
were really steeped in it.
Yes, and then my father had a theater as well. So he would. The theater was called the Players Company, and it was in the basement of the church that my mother and my brothers attended. So we were always there on a Sunday, there on the weekends, there in the afternoon, going to plays and rehearsals, and it was a joy to see, my father in his element. And then there were always cast parties at our house for whatever. Sometimes there were readings. Our families and friends were steeped in the arts as well. So we just knew it to be normal. But as I grew older, people would say, "How do you know all these songs?" Like, 'cause my mother used to sing them, And when I went to college, I remember going to see Porgy and Bess, and I didn't go to a liberal arts college or I went to a Northeastern, huge, college with multitude of people from all different backgrounds and things like that. But it wasn't an artsy or liberal arts school, so it was different. I'm like, "You going to Porgy and Bess?" I'm like, "Yeah, don't you want to go?" And they're like, "No, that's okay." So yeah, that was what life was like.
So is that when you realized that you really had not had a typical childhood that way?
Yes. That's when I guess to a certain degree I always knew it, but it was more pronounced than like, okay, you are really different. And I had to grow comfortable with that, because at times I didn't like that. I didn't like being different.
Yeah, I'm wondering how that, how did it hit you when you realized that wasn't normal? Was it sort of like, wow, I was lucky? Or was it more, boy, the rest of you missed out? Or was it something else?
It was combination of both. But in the teen years and things like that, when you go through those awkward teen years, it wasn't something that I always wanted to share.
Sure.
But it wasn't something that I could hide either, because Trenton, where I grew up, was not a really big city, but my mother, in addition to her being a singer, she also was director of the art school. Not the art school. I didn't mean to say art school. I meant to say the YWCA after school program.
Okay.
And kids all throughout the city, young ladies, attended that. So that was like 3 to 6 p.m. And then it also had a summer component. So she was well known for that. My father also taught college at Trenton State College, and he served on different boards and things like that. So people knew us, and it wasn't, you really you were like, oh, that's Don's daughter, that's Fran's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there was some pride in that, you know. But there also was a desire sometimes to hide from it, at least for me.
Sure.
Um, my older brother and my younger brother didn't. I don't think they had that same sometime discomfort that I had with it.
Mm-hmm. So what did it take in order for you to feel more comfortable once you realized how different it was?
The drive for the arts, because after a while it's like, well, this is what I love to do.
Mm-hmm.
So not to do it was holding back on who I was. So it was like come hell or high water, no matter how uncomfortable at times it could be.
Mm-hmm.
I got to do it, you know. So I just did. And then the other thing that was liberating is I went to performing arts high school,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the first year that it opened. So I was the first. It was only 2 years, juniors and seniors. So I was the first junior class and the first class to graduate um, in the 2 year program,
Mm-hmm.
and that was liberating because at that point, then I was really among peers, you
Right.
know, and I just really felt comfortable, and those were probably the two best years of all of my 12 years. And I had good years in K to 12. I'm not saying that, but they were
Mm-hmm.
the ones where it like all came together.
Sure.
Uh, and that was pivotal for me. It really was.
Well, that makes sense because yeah,
Hmm.
you're not going to feel like such a weirdo when everybody else is like you.
Hmm. Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah. And it's funny because prior to its opening, this was all during when Fame was big, Fame the
Mm-hmm.
movie, Fame the TV show, and I wanted to go to a school like that. So I shared that with my parents, and they were considering having me go live in Philadelphia with some of my relatives, and so that I could, attend the Performing Arts High School in Philadelphia. And
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden, one opens in Mercer County, and I was like, awesome.
Well, that's great.
Hmm.
So, when Todd first told me about you, he said that you were a poet, but you obviously are a lot more than a poet. What all else do you do?
Theater. My first ambition was dance, and I wanted to be a ballerina. But what curved that, pun intended, was I had scoliosis,
Oh.
and I had to stop dancing for a period of time because it was pretty aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
And 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 during that time, I began to pursue other things. I also played the piano, but I was not good at it. Not good. But I took it anyway.
Good for you.
So that, yeah. I played the flute a tiny bit, but again, not good at it. So my main expression of arts was through theater and poetry. The poetry piece came in as an adult, really. I had written poems as a kid, but just, you know, didn't really see that as a gift until I got
Mm-hmm.
older. Yeah.
So, when you went off to college, did you do theater while you were there, or did you switch into something completely different?
I did very little theater while I was in college. I was accepted into Mason Grove School of the Arts,
Oh.
um, Oberlin for theater, and probably could have gone anywhere um, for theater. And that's not said out of a haughty spirit, but just confident.
Mm-hmm.
But what I desired more than that, and I knew that even at 17, was a family life that wouldn't be complicated,
Right.
by the arts, and that is crazy because yeah, I just thought it would be easier not to have that extra pull. So I didn't pursue it wholeheartedly, and I pursued my other passion, which is education. And I went for teaching, and that's been the bulk of my life, since that time. And it's only over the last 10 to 15 years that I've really gone back to the other side, the artistic side, and developing that.
So I'm just curious, since your father also taught, was that a big influence in your decision to teach?
Yes. I loved seeing him teach. It was always in my bones. It's in all of us. My younger brother, I taught him, and he was and silly stuff, but I can clearly remember teaching him the ABCs, and just teaching him how to read certain words and things like that. So that was very pivotal in my decision to pursue education. My mother also, in the after school program, a teacher as well. So I guess it was just a natural path to pursue. But there were some sacrifices too in not pursuing it. Yep.
Absolutely. So did you decide to teach theater or to teach something else?
No, I decided to teach elementary school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was that teaching the little brother that must have done it, right?
Right. Elementary, middle, and now I work as an administrator in high school, an assistant principal. But throughout all of that, the arts has always been there, When I did graduate from college, one of the things that I stated was that I wanted to always have a school in which I would integrate the arts and education. So that has happened in so many different ways. Whatever school I've been in, I've always had programs like the Philadelphia Young Playwright Festival. I've had dancing classrooms, Philly, all different things that connect with the arts, because when that happens, the children open up.
Yes.
They discover more of who they are, and it becomes a catalyst to take them to different places.
Yes, absolutely. I used to teach English as a second language, and I always did a creative writing unit with my kids, even though a lot of the people that I taught with didn't think that they could do it. And I was like, of course they can do it. The grammar may not be perfect, but of course they can do it. And it was amazing what came out of them. So I'm sure you've seen some phenomenal things.
I have.
Is there any one in particular that stands out?
Wow. Through the invention of Facebook, I've been able to connect with a lot of my students, my first students. And they're now I'm going to date myself. They're now in their 30s. And one of them said to me, like, I reconnected with her, and she's, now has children herself. And she's like, you know what? I'll never forget the play that I wrote. And the play that she wrote was called Shovel My Sidewalk. And she said, I told my kids, that I wrote a play. They're like, no, you didn't, Mom. And she said, you gotta tell them that. I said, I will. But just to know that now this woman is in her 30s, and she remembers that play that she wrote. And that play went on to be performed in Philadelphia. And it also went to the New York level. at that point they had connections with New York for production there. So she remembered that, and she's gone through some hard times in her life and things like that. But the value, or one of the most valuable moments in her life where she recognized what a shining star that she is, happened through, through the arts, through theater, and through writing.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. I love that, especially that there was a New York connection. That must have been amazing for her.
Indeed.
And for the rest of you, but still, that's the kind of stuff
Mm-hmm.
that, that's why I taught the creative writing unit. It's like you need to have a chance to do something that's a little bit different and use the other parts of your brain and actually see what you can do that maybe you didn't think you can do. So I hear where you're coming from on that. I really do.
Yeah.
How does being an administrator compare for you to being a classroom teacher, especially in terms of the arts?
Well, it gives you a broader brush to paint with.
Mm.
You can spread a vision over a larger audience. And you don't have to worry. You have more resources at your disposal to get certain things in. Like I remember as a teacher, when I was informed that we could not do young playwrights anymore, and it was about funding at that time,
right?
And I said, okay, I'll raise the money,
Mm-hmm.
and we did. And, we sold M&Ms and candles and stuff like that. But as an administrator now, I have the opportunity to make certain that I can do whatever I possibly can do to get that money in so that the kids have it. Even at one point when the district didn't have much money at all, going through some financial crisis, I began to network with different organizations where we'd have residents come in, mm-hmm. and they would just do some different workshops with the children for a few weeks. And then we would do, we'd create different events. Like we did, the name of the school was Bernie Goes to Harlem, right? The name of the school is Bernie. So we did a whole thing on a Harlem Renaissance. And then we did another thing called, we took Walt Whitman's I Am Large, I Contain Multitudes, mm-hmm. and took his poem, and that became an opportunity for us to do a cross-cultural exchange or study of the various cultures that make up America and specifically made up that school. And the children learned Korean dancing. They learned pottery. They learned African dancing. It was amazing. And I felt very fortunate to be in a position where it wasn't just 30 students that I was impacting, mm-hmm. but 600 and some.
Wow. Yeah. And I'm mm-hmm. getting goosebumps just listening to this because it sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
What you can do even when you don't have a whole lot of money, just because you're determined to do it is
mm-hmm.
pretty amazing,
mm-hmm.
really.
Right.
Do you ever miss being in a classroom?
Oh, yeah, I do. I do. But what fulfills that desire is when I'm able to lead a professional development. Mm. So I just have exchanged students, in terms of your K-12 audience to an audience of adults. Mm-hmm. And what's funny about that is I will often have folks come up to me and they'll say, "Are you an actor?" I'm like, yeah. So we can see it in you. So, and I think every good teacher is, regardless of their exposure, in the arts, but I know that they see that in me because it is in me, and it's in me pretty deep, maybe deeper than some other folks.
Yeah, I never really thought about it, but you're right. When you're going to get up in front of students, there's definitely some acting that's involved there, even if it's just that it's you only bigger.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm curious about how you landed on poetry.
Oh, wow. That probably stems initially from my parents because my father and my mother both would read us stories and poetry, before we go to bed. Not every day, but they would do that. So I grew up hearing poetry, especially a lot of African American poets, Nikki Giovanni, Alice Childress. The list goes on and on. And then in addition to the teaching aspect of my parents, especially in the mid 70s, at the college, which is now the College of New Jersey, they would have different artists come in and, perform for the students. So I heard, Nikki Giovanni and others come in and do poetry, and Alice Childress would come to the theater. She would come to the after school program. So I heard it. And then in third grade, I remember one of my first poems I wrote was for Black History Month. And the teacher posted it in the classroom, and it was there for probably till June. So that encouraged me. I remember I know it was there for a long time because it was all battered, had stains and things on it, but it was up there. So writing those few poems at that time in my life just kind of set a seed there that continued. And then the next poem that I wrote that was significant to me wasn't really until I got married.
Oh, wow.
And I wrote a poem for my husband, ex-husband. And I delivered it to him on our wedding day, and I recited it. And folks were like, wow, you can really write. And I'm like, okay, yes, yeah. But I never really thought about it as something for more than just me, because I would write in my journal too. But then from that occasion, people would say, can you write a poem for my brother or my sister or my cousin? Can you write it for this occasion? So I began writing poetry based upon someone saying, well, you write this. And that began to really push me back into poetry and writing.
Is there any connection, just as I'm listening to you talk about this, and I'm kind of struck by the fact that you heard poetry probably before you ever really read it. And growing up in that environment with theater and music, was there a sort of musical element, a performance element to poetry, even when you were just writing it?
That's interesting. Yes, especially with Staggerly and the stories of the African folklore stories. There's a certain rhythm to it, and my father would read them. As I was saying earlier, so he would read them. So there's like a musical thing, cadence to it. And then my godfather was also a poet, a writer, professor, and he would come to the house, and both he and my father would be, reciting these poems and things that they had written. So I grew up hearing that, in addition to the fact that my mother sang. So they would do things together where it would be my godfather is reciting poetry, my mother is singing it, or other works, not necessarily singing the poems, but other works of like the Broadway classical or the spirituals. So they always went hand in hand with me. They did. I never thought about that till you said it, though. Mm-hmm.
It just seems like, because there is a music to poetry with all the rhythm and sometimes the rhyme and all of that. So it just seems like it would fit. So was Todd already writing poetry when you started?
Yeah. So that's an inspiration too, because I remember he wrote a short story. He wrote poems too, but he wrote a short story that was submitted to Ebony Junior magazine, which was the children's version of Ebony, and he won, and that was huge, And I remember, my parents and family celebrating that, and just to see like a published piece of work.
Sure.
From someone, from your brother, it's like, okay, a kid can do this too. So it did plant seeds in my life at that early age as well.
He did not tell me that story.
Yeah. He was very much ingrained in writing at an early age. And then did he tell you that he could have been? He had the major networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, were pursuing him for movies because he had been in this movie on NJ Network, was it New Jersey Network? But my parents wanted him to have a normal life too. So
I don't think he told me about that. I think I would remember that.
Yep.
He was holding out on me.
I'm trying to remember the movie. It was about the first Black male millionaire. I can't remember his name right now. And he played him as a kid. So yeah, he was highly pursued.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there was even more going on than I ever expected.
Yeah.
That's it. So it must have all seemed so much more possible to you than it does to most kids.
You're right. It's true. And that was, everything seemed so much more possible to me. I guess because I saw my family excel in so many different things that I know didn't seem possible. And I remember like the first time I didn't I was applying for this job. I'd already gotten a job, but it was a new school. And I remember I didn't get it. I was like, what? Because that's just the way I was raised. It's just like, you got it. And I now have grown to have a greater appreciation for my upbringing, and also a greater appreciation for those who haven't been raised that way, and what it does to your psyche, and why some of the students that I teach can't see very far beyond where they are.
Yeah. How do you address that with them?
Carefully, because if you go in there and you're like, yes, you can, they're like, please, do you understand what I see?
Right.
So I have to build a relationship with them first, and help them see that I value them right where they are for who they are, and then just keep reminding them of how special they are, and making certain that I make eye contact with them, and I say, morning, lady, morning, sir. It's those simple things, and that I'm consistently there, because folks are so used to being abandoned that they don't trust
Yes.
you for a while until they see you're going to be there. And then after they trust you and you build a relationship with them, you just begin to show a little bit more. You meet them where they are, like with the Philadelphia Young Playwrights Festival. We start with improv, or
Mm-hmm.
you start with rap, and then you talk about the theatrical part of that, and you just build them up, and you just take them to new levels, to new levels, to new levels, and expose them, take them to the theater, take them to see dances, to Harlem School of Dance, and then expand them beyond what's comfortable sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like you did ballroom dancing. They weren't comfortable with that at first, but you just keep showing them different things and pushing the envelope until they're a little bit more comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm. And I think the most important thing that you may have just said is about showing them that you value them right where they are.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot
Mm-hmm.
of us at any age don't hear that very often. So, to be in a position to do that for kids and try to get them out of their shell or their preconceived notions of what they can do and be is really powerful stuff.
It is. It is.
You're making me jealous, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go do that because I love that kind of stuff. That's why I'm a creativity coach. I love helping
Yeah.
anybody to say, so what if you're 63 years old and you've never written anything before?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you can't.
True
And it's
that.
just as true if you're 13.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter. It's just about try it out, see what happens.
Right.
So what do you do with your poetry these days?
Well, one of the things what do I do with it right now? I try to share it more. And my brother, my eldest brother, has helped me to do that, pushing me out there to do more of my work in open mics and things of
Mm-hmm.
that nature. I'm working on a book, and the book is called Lip: Life Issues Poetically.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I'm taking, I think it's going to be 10. It might be 12. I'm not sure. 10 just life issues life issues, life events, love, loss,
Mm-hmm.
death, new beginnings, things of that nature. And finding poems that I've written that line up with that particular area, and
Mm-hmm.
then exposing people to the story behind that particular poem.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a little different.
Yeah, but I think that sounds really interesting. I always love knowing where things come from.
Me too. Me too. And I wanted to take the guesswork sometimes out of a piece. I didn't want to take the guesswork out. I wanted to present, maybe make things more open.
Mm-hmm.
Share the authors, or the poets, thinking behind that, because a lot of times we're guessing, and
Right.
there's a certain coolness about that too, because it keeps you on your toes. But I also think that sharing something doesn't have to shut down someone else's creativity or their
Right.
viewpoint on it. It just gives you another lens, another way to look at it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because we all see things through our own experience. So we're all going to see something different anyway. But it's
Right.
still interesting to hear somebody else's perspective on it, especially if they're the one who wrote
Mm-hmm.
it. But even if they aren't, that's kind of what all those high school English classes are about to a certain extent,
Mm-hmm.
even though
Mm-hmm.
they can get kind of bogged down in the details sometimes.
Right.
But
Right.
no, that sounds like a really cool idea. When you
Mm-hmm.
started doing open mic, were you comfortable getting up and performing in your own work in front of people, or did theater make it more, I want to be somebody who's not me when I stand up in front of others?
No, I enjoy being me. That's the crazy part, because I am, or at least I should say, was very, very shy
Mm.
growing up. But put me on a stage and bam, it was like this whole nother world opened up. And that's the same way I feel about my poetry. And when I'm up there, I can give it a voice like no one else can.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that's liberating to me. Hmm.
Sure. And do you still take requests from people, or do you mostly write your own things now?
I I still take requests, but I find myself now writing more of my own things, and I also the poetry now is there are a lot more analogies in it, a
Mm-hmm.
lot more metaphors than I found in my earlier writing, and that um, I'm appreciative of it, but at the same time, it's a little bit frightening too because I don't ever want to lose my audience. One of the things that I always thought made my poetry special is that anybody could understand it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they could get it, they could flow with it. And now I'm like writing these things. And I'm like, okay, I get it, but does anybody else get it? You
Mm-hmm.
know, so I want to make certain that I have that balance, but at the same time, I also don't want to lose this new thing either
Right.
because it could be just something really special too.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
Mm-hmm.
there's room for other people to interpret those metaphors their own ways too, on top of which may, do something completely unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, do you and Todd ever write together or compare notes, or kind of go over each other's poems, or is it a completely independent thing?
It's a completely independent thing in this standpoint of just both of us writing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he writes his poems, I write my poems. But what is cool is when one is written, it's like you want to share it real quick.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get it out. So we will call each other and share different things that we've written, and that's cool. To be the first one that hears it. It's like
Right.
a new child, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Absolutely.
Mhm. Mhm.
And this is reminding me that he actually read a poem for us that he had just written about half an hour before we did our interview. Do you have anything that you would share with us?
That's funny. I didn't think about it, but yeah, I did. Let's see. What can I share with you? Oops. Okay. I will do one in honor of Black History Month.
Great.
All right. And this one's not a very long one. It's called Black Beauty Found in Roses.
Ooh.
Rare, unique, a composition of what many said just could or should not be, but yet you were and are fine leaders of your home, villages, cities, states, churches, corporations, universities, colleges, grammar and high schools, using the diversity of your God given tools. Royal and wise kings of Timbuktu, Mali, and Shanghai, creating mathematical equations in libraries long before Asia and Europe, causing many to look up at what you created. Simply stated, you are rare, unique, a composition of what many said just could or should not be, but yet you were and are tragically countless, a composition of charred strength hung mercilessly from a poplar tree,
Ooh.
a composition of melanin whipped, bleeding flesh, striving to maintain a human spirit that says, despite your animalistic enslavement of me, I will not be broken. God's spirit has spoken through me, despite your perverted teaching of him to me. Can't you see that beautiful black rose that one seldom knows exists, but yet when one notices can barely resist, but must insist on admiring your beauty, strength, resilience, intelligence, and creativity? Come and see the compilation of the world's nations composed in one hue. Black rose, God first created you, strength, tender, and thorns. Bloom and let your fragrance fill the earth. Rare, unique, a composition of what many said just could or should not be, but yet you were and are simply beautiful.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Oh, this is powerful, powerful stuff, especially to hear you read it.
Thank you.
Wow. So I'm wondering, as we're getting near the end here, if there's any particular thing that you've learned from working with your students, or any piece of advice that you would offer to anyone who's listening, who's a little bit hesitant about maybe what they want to do, or isn't sure that they're really a writer or a poet or a dancer or a musician or an actor?
I'd say go forth and just do it. If you fall, so what? That in and of itself is a journey, is a lesson to be learned that can enrich your experience. And be true. Be true in whatever you do. When it comes to writing poetry, one thing that I've always kept as a rule for me is don't be confined. Don't let the poetry, don't let the rhyme be the thing that masters your message. Tell the message. Don't worry about a rhyme. Don't worry about that. Just tell the story. Because if you let the rhyme or the configuration limit you, then you might miss something that needs to be said.
Yeah. Getting hung up on the nitty-gritty details and losing the big picture. Yeah. Absolutely. We did that really well together, almost like we planned it.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been fantastic, and I've really enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you a little bit.
Likewise.
That's our show for this week. Many thanks to Rachel Marianno for sharing her story with us. Tune in next time for the last in this series of sibling interviews, when I talk to Todd and Rachel's brother, jazz pianist Orrin Evans. As always, thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. You can find show notes, the 6 creative beliefs that are screwing you up, and more at fycuriosity.com. I'd also love for you to join the conversation on Instagram. You'll find me at fycuriosity. Follow Your Curiosity is produced by me, Nancy Norbeck, with music by Joseph McDade. If you like Follow Your Curiosity, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. It really helps me reach new listeners. See you next time.